What I got here is my own 3D pre-made base that all I need to do is print it out and stick it to my Mini. But the best part is that I don't have to glue anything to it, and it already has a 10 millimeter magnet hole in the bottom. And due to some faulty software here on my computer, this is officially the third time I've recorded this video. Sorry it's taken me forever to get it out. But I wanted to show you how I did this in general terms here. What I've got here in the middle is a pre-made base. All of these are going to be available at the link down below. They're all available on Colts 3D. I'm never going to charge for these. What I have is a base that is exactly 32 by 32. Well, because that's a 32 millimeter base size. And what I've found is I want mine to have the magnet hole in the bottom. What I've got here is somebody else's 32 millimeter base that is clearly almost 40 millimeter, and there is no sort of magnet hole in the bottom of this one at all. What I've found is even if I get miniatures from a company who says they make 32 millimeter bases, you can see here we've kind of got an odd size. And I think the best thing to do is just take the bits from this that I want and stick it on my own base. So what I typically do is make sure the only object I have selected here is this base. You can see it's not the other one. And then go into object. Nope. Go into edit and split. Now what split does is anything above this line or to the left of this line or whatever you're going to use this line, it's going to keep, and then it's going to get rid of what's down below unless you choose to keep both option, which it's just going to split it. But I want to show you a couple of things here. Number one, when I'm going to split it, I move this piece up and down, drag it up and down until I get to where I can either see see this little line here from the old base and then come up a little. What I want to make sure I do is I'm not getting too many weird holes here because these are going to come out dead flat on the base. Or, I mean, if all you're looking for is just a couple of little rocks, that works as well. But I need to show you a couple of things. So we're going to move up, and looking in the reflection here, there's a few things you got to notice. This is not what we want because there's going to be a huge cavity inside of this. We don't want it to print it. And actually, Microsoft 3D Builder is going to do something interesting. You could tell it to keep the bottom, keep the top. We need to keep the top. And go ahead and click the split button here. And you're going to see Microsoft 3D Builder is fairly quick with this process. And unlike the last video, it went ahead and fixed the mesh where normally it would have put a weird cavity in this. I know that this piece back here is broken, so we're going to show you that. But if we go to this texture, we're going to call this the texture, this the base. If you go to the texture, you can see in our scale here that it is still too large. And if we were to move it over onto that, it's just going to overhang the bases. Maybe you want that. I don't. So first things first, it is easier to put everything in an XY coordinates as zeros. So if you go click on it, click 0 and enter, and then type in 0 and enter, you can see what this does is this moves our original base to 0. Make sure you unclick it, click on your other texture, and do the exact same thing. We just want to move it to the zeros. And now these two pieces are aligned in the air, or in this zone, perfectly circular. And if we were to drag it down there, this is where I was talking about how that texture there is just going to be a little too big for our base. So what I have found to be is for my 32 millimeter bases, that we want to scale this to a very specific size. Make sure that you click on the scale here, lock this, that's unlocked, that's locked, and then choose the biggest of the two. So this one's 36.8, this one's 36.6. We want to click on this, and then in this case, I've learned we want to make it 29.75 millimeters. That scales everything to that, and we have now smaller texture, right? What we want to do then is we can kind of play around with where this is at. And you can see that the base gives us a little bit of lip here, or a reveal here. And that's what we're looking for, is we want our texture to be a little bit smaller than the base. That way when we get to painting this rim, we don't really get the black onto the texture. And then next we need to make sure that these are one piece, because when we go ahead and print them out, we don't want this piece on its own. The idea is to eliminate the time of making bases by pre-rendering, pre-making our base on in this program. So what I typically do is drag this up and down until I can see that it snaps onto the texture. If you drag it too far in there, you'll see we lose a little. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. So I drag it down, and then I click on the Z axis here. And whatever this number is, right now it's 7.8 something, we want to go ahead and make that a 1/10 of a millimeter lower. So 7.7. What that does is that drops that into the base. That way when it renders this out and saves this out, you have one texture. If you were to go and split this, you'll notice that this thing will split from, or straight down the middle of these two, and it will be one solid piece. So that is it. I wish it was harder than that, but it's just not. So you would go ahead and save this out as an STL, stick it in your printer, or well, don't stick your screen in the printer. Stick this file in your printer and send it out. Okay, well, I guess I'll show you the other stuff on the screen here, because that's probably why you're here. Is we could steal textures from other people's companies, but I think it's much better to steal texture from everything. And so what I've learned is in 3D Builder, you can insert a cylinder here. We're just going to use a cylinder because it's circular and our base is circular. If you want to get into the hex system, you can use the hexagon for this exact same thing. What we know is that we want our base texture here to be that 29.75. So what we'll do is we'll scale our cylinder to that exact bit, drag it on over here. And what I want to show you is there is all kinds of texture all over this object. And what I'm going to easily do here is just drag this cylinder into. There's a neat little tool in a program called Intersect, and what it'll allow us to do is choose two options, and then it will take the difference of the two. So what I'm deciding to do here is I want the piece that is inside of this cylinder, that texture that's going to show up inside there. So what you do, put your cylinder where you're going to take the texture from. Choose both objects in this right screen here. So you can see I have the cylinder and I have the, I think this is a platform of something. Go up to Edit, and intersect. And we now have another new texture. If we take this back over to the 0, 0, which is way down here, we could drag this texture right on top of it, and we have a plinth. But in our case, we don't need a plinth. We just need a normal base with this sci-fi looking texture. So just like we did before, we're going to click the split tool, and we're going to drag this up until we get to what seems like a reasonable amount of base here without getting too weird with the textures. And I think if we drag it up here and our flat bits are these same holes, same flat bits there, this texture is not too tall. We can then split it and do the same process we just did. We drag this on down, and you can see that there is going to make an interesting little base. Whatever this number is, we're going to go ahead and drop it another 10th. That way it's into that, and now we have a nice space looking texture base. And then on to the odd one up here. I think I'll just drag this a little closer. So we can click on this texture and delete it because I want to show you that we can use pretty much any texture off of anything, even if it's got all this weirdness going on. This is supposed to be like a street sign, billboard lighting piece. And we're going to run into a couple of problems here that I want to show you. First, go ahead and insert that cylinder again. Tell it to be the 29.75. And then we drag it over into our mesh again. Mesh physically and verbally, because this is a texture mesh. And you can see here that this cylinder is going to give us this weird pieces here, and we don't necessarily want that. The cool part about this program is we can scale anything we want just by dragging these little arrows out. And you'll see that once I do that, we can drag this little cylinder into the middle of the mesh here. Same process, go ahead and click on the 2, and we go ahead and click the intersect. And then you're going to find out what happens is we got all this weird stuff here that if we were to drop that on the base, these two aren't going to adhere very well. And then you would have a whole bunch of islands when you went to go print it. So what I found are a couple of things. We can split this like we were before. You can drag this up and down. You would like to stay somewhere in the middle of this texture. So what I tend to do is go right about the middle, and then I start looking for, well, I need to generate them. I start looking for some artifacts. So these little pieces here, these are going to make it really difficult for the texture to print. So I drag it up a little bit more so that I get the right amount. I've got a little bit of weird texture here, but we're just going to see what happens with it. So we split it, and 3D Builder didn't find a problem with any of the bottom of the mesh. Fantastic. So go ahead and drop that back to the zeros again. And down in here. And you can see it makes that little snap action there. I want to show you a couple of things though. If you go up to View and turn off the grid, I can drag this texture down into it, and what could potentially happen is your texture could come into this hole. Depending on how far you drop that texture in there, obviously it's not tall enough for it to show here and be into that magnet hole. But this magnet hole only has enough clearance for the magnet. So what I tend to do is just drop it till it does the snap bit. And in one of the settings here, you can turn snapping on and off. It's on by default. So you can see we've got a nice little reveal around there. I think if we're going to try to get rid of those couple of artifacts there, if we want to, we can drag this in there a little more. But you can see we lose all of this in here. So once again, just drop it on, and then we're going to change that, whatever this number is, to another 10th down. So that's it. Export it out, print it out, send it on. No more glue and rocks and stuff to your bases, unless you really want to do with all that. I don't. So in the link below for all the free bases, everything I've made is all to the GW scale. So I've got all of those down here. And thanks for watching.